What if the smartest trip you could take in 2026 isn't about chasing cheap flights, viral spots, or flexing passport stamps, but about choosing the one country that already solved every travel problem you hate? Missed connections, bad food, sketchy transport, tourist traps, wasted days. Singapore quietly deleted all of that. And before you roll your eyes and say, yeah, Singapore's clean and boring, hold that thought, because that exact assumption is why people keep getting shocked when they actually visit. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Singapore isn't just a good place to visit in 2026, but arguably the best, and I'll close this out with the one reason people never feel done with Singapore, no matter how many times they come back. Here's the value up front. Singapore in 2026 gives you maximum experience with minimum friction. You're not fighting the city. You're flowing with it. And that changes everything about how a trip feels. Most destinations demand effort before they reward you. Singapore flips that. It rewards you immediately, then keeps surprising you if you pay attention. And the open loop here is simple: why does a country this small keep outperforming massive tourism giants year after year? We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the future, because Singapore in 2026 feels like what other countries are trying to become. Not in a dystopian, soulless, everything is screens way, but in a calm, intentional, human-first way. You land at Changi Airport, which honestly feels less like an airport and more like a gentle introduction to how Singapore thinks. No chaos, no yelling, no confusion about where to go. Immigration is smooth, baggage doesn't play hide and seek, and suddenly you're standing under a giant indoor waterfall thinking, wait, am I still traveling or did I accidentally teleport into a lifestyle ad? And that tone carries everywhere. Transport systems that work. Digital payments that actually make sense. Signage that doesn't assume you're psychic. In 2026 especially, with smarter mobility systems, greener infrastructure, and AI quietly running things in the background, the city feels effortless. Not flashy effortless. Calm effortless. The kind that lets you enjoy the place instead of constantly troubleshooting your day. And if you've ever traveled somewhere and felt exhausted just existing there, you already know how valuable that is. Now let's address the elephant in the hawker center: food. Singapore doesn't just have good food, it has unfair food. The kind of food that ruins other trips for you. And the wild part is that in 2026, the food scene is somehow getting better without losing its soul. Hawker culture isn't being replaced, it's being preserved, refined, and respected. You're eating recipes passed down through generations, cooked by people who've done the same dish tens of thousands of times. And then, 5 minutes later, you're in a sleek cafe serving next-level fusion that somehow still feels authentic. Michelin stars next to plastic chairs. That contrast isn't a gimmick, it's Singapore's personality. If you believe food is a core part of travel, not just fuel between attractions, Singapore is already winning. Quick pause here. If food is the number one thing that decides whether a trip was worth it, hit like right now, because you're exactly the kind of traveler Singapore was built for. What people outside Singapore get wrong is assuming small equals limited. Singapore is compact, yes, but that's not a weakness. It's a superpower. In 2026, that compactness becomes even more valuable. You can go from skyline to jungle, from shopping district to beach, from cultural heritage to nightlife, all in the same day. Without feeling rushed or drained. No, we lost half the day in traffic. No, we'll do that next time. You actually get to do things. And because the city is so intentionally designed, every area has identity. Chinatown feels like Chinatown. Little India doesn't feel like a themed mall. Kampong Glam has character. New districts feel modern without erasing what came before. It's rare to find a place that balances evolution and preservation this well, and in 2026, Singapore is arguably the gold standard. Here's where the "Singapore is boring" myth really falls apart. Singapore isn't boring, it's selective. The fun isn't screaming at you from billboards. It's layered. Night safaris where you're suddenly face to face with animals under open skies. Rooftop bars that feel like secret levels unlocked after sunset. Speakeasies hidden behind unmarked doors. Festivals that quietly turn neighborhoods into full-on street celebrations. Art spaces, live music, pop-ups, and food events that don't feel manufactured for tourists. Singapore doesn't beg for attention. It waits for curiosity. And if you're the kind of traveler who likes discovering things instead of being herded, that's dangerous, in a good way. Now let's talk money, because someone's already thinking it. Yeah, but Singapore is expensive. That's half true, and completely misleading. Singapore is expensive if you travel it lazily. If you default to luxury hotels, tourist restaurants, and taxis everywhere, sure, your wallet will feel it. But here's the secret: Singapore lets budget and luxury coexist without friction. You can sleep in a clean, modern capsule hotel, eat world-class meals for pocket change, use public transport that's better than taxis in most countries, and still splurge selectively on experiences that actually matter. The city doesn't force you into one lane. And that flexibility is rare. If you've ever felt like a destination punished you for not being rich, Singapore doesn't do that. There's another thing people don't like admitting matters until they experience it: safety. Singapore in 2026 remains one of the safest places on the planet, and that changes how you travel more than you think. You walk at night without clenching your jaw. You explore without constantly checking your pockets. You take your phone out without anxiety. That freedom adds hours to your day, energy to your mood, and depth to your experience. You don't rush back to the hotel. You linger. You wander. And that's when cities reveal themselves. If that kind of peace of mind would change how you travel, drop a comment, because once you've had it, it's hard to go back. Let's loop back to the question from the start: why does Singapore keep outperforming countries 10 times its size? It's because Singapore understands something most destinations don't: it doesn't try to overwhelm you. It respects your time, your energy, and your intelligence. It invites you in instead of flexing at you. You leave Singapore not exhausted, not confused, not feeling like you missed everything, but feeling like you've only scratched the surface. That's why people come back. Not because they didn't see enough, but because what they saw actually made sense, and in 2026 specifically, Singapore hits a sweet spot. Mature infrastructure, fresh experiences, preserved culture, and forward-thinking upgrades all converging at once. It's not chasing trends, it's setting quiet standards. If you want chaos, there are better places. If you want raw adventure, there are cheaper places. But if you want a trip that feels smart, satisfying, and surprisingly fun without friction, Singapore isn't just a good choice, it's the best one. So here's what to do next. If you want to know exactly how to plan a Singapore trip in 2026 without wasting money, missing hidden gems, or falling into tourist traps, watch the next video on your screen where I break down the perfect Singapore itinerary. Day by day, mistake by mistake.